The CBD has become an unsafe shithole and the police do nothing about it. Last night I went into the city to have dinner with my girlfriend. Right as we leave the train station at Southern Cross, a crazy meth head starts pushing me and threatening to smash me, while we wait for the pedestrian crossing. He ended up pushing me onto the road before walking off. Afterwards about 5 people came to see if we were okay, although no one stepped in while we were getting attacked. 2 minutes later we pass a huge guy off his face screaming about pedophiles or something while acting extremely aggressive, kicking bins etc. We went another direction because we were already shaken from the previous experience. Then we get to Elizabeth St near Flinders and there's groups of 20 crackheads screaming and causing trouble for everyone in the area. Why is nothing being done about this? We didn't see a single police officer the entire night and I'm sure they wouldn't give a fuck anyway. The soft approach toward the homeless needs to end and something serious needs to be done before more innocent people get hurt by these maniacs. After your initial encounters, heading to Flinders Elizabeth streets could best be described as out of the frying pan and into the fire. I've spent half my life here in Melbourne and I'm not sure what the police actually do. This is not a knock on them, but every time I've had a crime committed against me, e.g. stolen property, house burgled etc., the common sentiment from friends is don't expect them to do anything, they're too busy doing something else more important. I remember sometime in the 2000s, police used to walk in groups of 4 around the city. Whatever happened to this? We need more psychiatric hospitals and to fund those institutions and pay the people who work in them far more than we currently do. People don't like tax though, so what you gonna do? Also, Shard wasn't such a problem in the past. I live in downtown Toronto these days and oh boy does the violence from the homeless ramp up here compared to Melb's. North American homelessness is something else, even in Canada. The root is the rising costs of living and the gutting of social policies and programs that support the poorest. Having worked in bars and backpackers in the CBD for most of the 2010s, this isn't a new thing. Or even unique to Melbourne. The only thing that changes is the drug of choice. Who would have thought stripping all the funds from mental health care and closing down facilities would have a material impact? Unfortunately, all services are stretched to breaking point. Mental health, drug and alcohol services and homeless services just don't have anywhere to place house help. They go through the revolving door of the local police station and then back out onto the streets again. It's a tough situation and unfortunately it's only going to get worse. This is nothing new. Back in the 80s my brother and I were assaulted by a rando while we waited for the tram at the Flinders end stop on Elizabeth Street. A couple of years later I had my jaw dislocated by a fellow passenger who kicked me in the face as I got off the 19 tram in broad daylight in almost exactly the same place. We used to have large mental institutions. They were often horrible, poorly managed, and residents were exploited and over-medicated and received minimal therapeutic care. Then we deinstitutionalized. Now we have people experiencing varying degrees of psychosis with no homes, no care, and all that remains is cops to lock them up for the night or forensic institutions for serious crime. There has to be a better place to land on this spectrum. News and police after people got ran over by a mentally ill guy on Book Street. Damn, what a tragedy, who would have known this could happen? Literally take a walk any day of the week through CBD and it's clear as day something is terribly wrong. The city smells like piss, homeless and unwell crackheads are just left around to their own devices, all while some of the most lucrative businesses are open in the same vicinity. Where are taxpayers' money going? Certainly not the goddamn CBD. Literally looks and feels like a cesspool of shit. I work at Elizabeth St and every word you mentioned here is true and happens on a daily basis. I used to love living in the CBD. Everything close, shopping malls, convenient restaurants, easy to catch up with friends, but the last 6 months have been hell. Trams always full AF, noisy AF, and some places like Flinders Station and Elizabeth St are now full of crackheads screaming and gathering together doing drugs in front of everyone. It's sad and I hope Melb's won't turn out to be something similar to what is going on in some cities in the US. I've never lived in a big city, but I'd always assumed they were all like this. I would never walk around one at night. It's messed up. I was on a tram just yesterday and a guy who was either on drugs or suffering significant mental health issues was screaming at people at how people get buried in the Yarra and how others on the tram could be next. The guy then proceeded to threaten someone on the tram and spat at a few bystanders. Had another guy talk about bombs on the tram a few months ago. It's extremely bad. I try to avoid parts of Elizabeth St now. The country is a dump, police can't be held accountable. The justice system and every other system has failed. On a lesser level, where I live, there are a group of people who almost every day sit in the nice new seating areas on the main road, and drink grog all day. Nothing is done about. Not even the council, whose building is no more than 50 m away, seem to care. What are the police going to do when the justice system places them back into the community? The question should be more along the lines of, what preventative support measures are being implemented to get people back on the right track if they choose to participate before it gets to the state we now find ourselves in? Who are we kidding though? Tough on crime and more jails win more votes than social, medical supports, hey. Yep, and you'll be attacked for bringing this up. I've consistently talked about how crime is a problem and I always get the same responses. It won't be fixed anytime soon because so many people gaslight those who have experienced violence firsthand. Also they ignore reality, because they probably live far away from it themselves. Melbourne has a real crime problem and it's a real shame nothing gets done to fix it. Kind of what happens when you vote for parties that force people into poverty. I try and sympathize with people who are scared about what's happening, but at the same time, I'm playing a tiny violin. Some cranky old Asian lady shoved me and then screamed "fuck you" at me recently in the city as I walked past her. She wasn't on drugs, just a bitch. Sounds like a standard night since I started going out in the 90s tbh. I hate going into the CBD, get such a bad feeling every time and it just feels so unsafe. It's definitely getting worse. I've lived here for over 4 years and this year I'm doing my best to completely avoid the city. People are becoming unhinged. Everybody is stressed and trying to cope. You're seeing some of the symptoms of that. Southern Cross and Elizabeth Flinders are hotspots. I have to be at Southern Cross, but I minimize time and avoid as much as possible. You're 100 right. This shit is out of hand. Nice to see Australia has its very own San Francisco in the making. I was in Melbourne a few weeks ago and stayed in the CBD, was surprised at how much safer it felt compared to Brisbane's CBD. What can the police do? Arrest them to be bailed hours later? The whole judicial system is completely fucked. Those kids who threw that 14 years old out the car in Glen Eira. Already on bail, all 3 of them. I visited Melbourne recently and while at the time it was on the cards as somewhere for us to move to, I left with the impression that Melbourne has a lot of unhinged people close to the city. Every tram ride felt more uncomfortable than I expected it to. Problem did not exist 30 years ago. The only homeless were the winos with the flagon of cheap sherry. Mental health services got cut, ICE caught on in a big way, public housing investment hasn't kept up, rental crisis, and this is what you get. You're confusing crime with mental health. Which is its own shit show. The CBD will always have people begging because of the volume of foot traffic. Some of those begging aren't homeless and some of them are nutbags. In general, I avoid Flinders Station and the Collins end of Southern Cross. Okay, so maybe ask the state government this question. You pretty much can't do anything unless they commit an offense. They've just decriminalized drunk in public too, so you can't just take away the drunks. Give the cops the powers to do the job and they will. Melbourne CBD is a shithole, mentally challenged, drunk and drug-affected, violence-filled garbage of a city. How do I know? I'm in Melbourne CBD every night for work and can't wait to get out of there ASAP when finished.